Hey, I'd like to thank you guys for checking out CWEEDS, Christ's Way of Evangelism and Encouraging Disciples to Service, and my name is Michael. I would like to share with you guys a story that happened a few weeks back. But before we get to that story, I'd like to just add just a little bit from a few weeks before that. There's a group of people that I met here not too long ago, and among that group was a guy named John. Okay, I was going one week to go check on John and these other guys, and they weren't there that day, but I ran into another fellow whose name was Bob. Okay, now when I ran into Bob, Bob was on the other side of a 6-foot chain link fence. And I'm talking with Bob just a little bit, and I handed Bob a pair of socks, and Bob asked me if he could get a pair of socks for his girlfriend Jane, who was over at the intersection flying a cardboard sign asking for help. So I give Bob a pair of socks, and he takes those over to his girlfriend Jane, and I see this with my eyes, right? Now, fast forward to a few weeks back to the story that I want to share with you, and I was visiting with John and these other guys again, and John, I had shared some socks, I was sharing the Word of God, and when I got done, John got kind of aggravated with one of the other guys there, and it kind of just started, you know, this frustrated verbal exchange. And then that guy, Bob, that I had met a few weeks earlier, showed up on the other side of that same chain link fence. And John gets up and goes over to Bob, and they start having this verbal exchange with the fence still in between them. And I didn't see this happen, but I didn't find out until later that Bob spit in John's face. Now, needless to say, when something like that happens, it is not necessarily going to end well. And in this situation, it did not end well. What happened was John then proceeded to find himself something he could use. He found a brick. He goes around that chain link fence, and he's going after Bob. Right? And so as he's going around that chain link fence, I'm calling him. I'm like, John, come back, man. Don't worry about it. It's not all that. Like I said, I didn't know he had just had his face spit in, right? And Bob was a little drunk too and just being obnoxious. And so John goes around and he meets Bob in the middle of the road. And I really thought that he was just going to kind of start, fronting off a little bit, maybe posturing or whatever. No, he didn't do anything like that. He got straight down to business. He took that brick and he just knocked Bob upside the head with it. And when he did that, Bob dropped down to the ground, and John proceeds to stomp on him. And I'm just like, whoa, I can't let this go on. And so I ran up there and I grabbed a hold of Bob's wrist. I grabbed Bob by the wrist and I pulled him out of the street because he was in the middle of the street. And I pulled him up into the grass. And then I'm going through in my mind how to defuse this because John looked like he was still wanting to beat on Bob some more. And I didn't think it was a good idea to go face to face with John and try to talk him out of the brick, just because if he was still angry, I didn't want to put myself right there in his face. So what I ended up doing was I got over Bob and I put myself over Bob's torso and over Bob's head, and was telling John that he really needed to just calm down and not keep beating this guy. And so he ended up leaving. He left the situation, and I dialed 911. And while I'm waiting for the ambulance to come, I was talking to one of Bob's friends who was there on the scene but hadn't intervened to help. He was saying that Bob starts a lot of fights and runs his mouth a lot, and he kind of felt like Bob needed to suffer the consequences of his actions, and so that's why he chose not to step in. And so while I'm talking with him, I realized that Bob's girlfriend is there, right? And I had not met her yet, did not know her name, so I asked her name, and she said her name was Jane. And I mean, as soon as she said that, I could tell by her voice, I could tell by everything, because she had on a baseball cap and sunglasses, so I couldn't see right away just by her physical features. But as soon as she gave me her name, I knew exactly who she was, and she used to be a customer of mine. I do tree care by trade. A number of years ago, I also did lawn care, and she was one of my lawn customers. We're talking maybe 7-8 years ago. I mowed this lady's lawn. I did some tree work for her, and she also attended the church that I went to for a number of months. I had invited her to church, and she was coming, and she was really enjoying that. But then what happened was somebody upset her, and so she stopped coming to fellowship with us. She stopped coming to church, and eventually she moved away. I didn't know what happened to her. I hadn't seen her or heard about her for a number of years, and so here I was looking at her face to face, and this was my old customer, and I was just floored to realize, you know, just how life can throw us those curveballs sometimes, and we just don't know how to handle them. Maybe we're not equipped emotionally, or maybe we're not prepared spiritually, or maybe it's financially. I don't know, but something happens, and the next thing you know, we're down and out. We're on the streets. And so here I knew this lady when she had a home of her own, when she was able to afford lawn care and tree care. And now I'm looking at her, and she's living on the streets, and she had lost this weight. She's living with this alcoholic who is beating her. Her friend told me himself that her boyfriend Bob beat her. And they weren't even living in a shelter. They would sleep in the woods wherever they could find to sleep. And it just really got me thinking about how quickly life can change for us, and when things seem to be going in one direction pretty good, bam, all of a sudden something happens and we're in a whole new direction that we never planned. And so I guess what I would share from that, and really I guess hope that people will think about and consider, is when we see people in that situation, you know, it's not for us to say, oh, well, they're there because they're druggies, or they're just going to use the money if we help them to go buy alcohol, or, you know, it's their own fault, they should go get a job or whatever, you know. And the reality of it is, maybe every single one of those things are true, right? Maybe that is exactly the situation for them at this point. But the thing is that Christ looked down into every one of our lives. He saw our situation, and He saw what we needed was compassion. And so that's what I would take from that, and I would share with you guys here with this message, is when you see people in that situation, make sure that compassion is your first response. You know, maybe giving them money isn't the thing to do at that point, but, you know, take the time to give them human dignity in some way or another. Treat them like a human being. Give them that compassion. Just a smile and a hello if that's all you have to give for the time. But compassion, Christ gave it to us, and He commands us to share that with the people around us. So God bless you guys. I'd like to encourage you to continue to check out CWEEDS, the Facebook. We're going to be putting more stuff on YouTube and our website. So check that out, and as always, we ask that you keep us in prayer as we continue to go to downtown Kansas City, Missouri, and share Christ with the people. God bless you guys. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.